Hi, this is Tony Robbins. Listen, I want to put out this special message to you, an alert, if you will, an alarm, a cautionary tale, something for you to just to consider. Right now, the stock market is, as you probably see, beginning to grow again and expanding, and people are putting money back in the market. And I've had the unique privilege of spending the last 18 years of my life personally coaching one of the top 10 financial traders in the history of the world. This is a man who in 1987, when the stock market crashed its largest single percentage in a day still, he made more money than anyone had in history on that day. He made literally, $500 million in a day. Today that doesn't sound like much when we hear trillions of dollars, but back then that was the most money anyone had ever made in a day. And it was a day when everybody else lost money. So he had the ability to see what was coming, to anticipate it. And he was so effective, the President of the United States called him and said, what do we do? He literally called the market like a week in advance, almost hour by hour with incredible accuracy. He wasn't somebody who just channeled this, he was just brilliant. Unfortunately, after being so accurate, and after kind of like walking on the moon, what do you do after you do that? He lost some of his focus and his edge, and he lost money for many years after that. And I was brought in to work with him to do a turnaround. And I'm proud to tell you that over these 18 years, he's made money every single year that I've worked with him. And in 2008, when many of the hedge funds were losing 30, 40, 50, 60, some of them as much as 80%, he made more than 20% in profit that year, in a year when all hell was breaking loose. So I tell you that because I'm putting out this warning, not because I'm so smart or I have all these answers. I'm not coming to you as a market trader or a timer, I should say. I'm not coming to you to tell you what to do. I'm just coming to you to kind of say, right now is a time you might want to consider really educating yourself and deciding, is this a time to take some stuff that you've made investments with off the table if they're in the stock market, especially obviously if they're in manufacturing or retail or banking or, God forbid, in the area of home building or housing or something of that nature. I'm telling you this because I want to give you just some things to consider, and then you make your own decisions. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not a financial planner, nor am I selling you any form of stock. I'd feel bad if I didn't warn you. And when I say warn you on something to consider. I'm not saying this is how it is. I'll give you a little history for 2 seconds. In April of 2008, having worked with this gentleman and other top people in the financial world, I obviously got a real good look at what was happening with credit default swaps, what was happening with the over-leveraging of various financial institutions, and the insiders were talking about what was coming at that point. And so I took my best clients, my platinum partners, and I flew them to DubLi and said, listen, you guys, I always bring you the best. I try to give you an advantage in advance of anything that's coming. The financial world, as you know, it's about to change radically in levels you won't even imagine, and it's coming real quick. I can't tell you when, but I know it's coming quick. Sometime in the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months, it's going to happen. And we spent 3 days where I brought in experts to paint them a picture of how they should protect themselves. Because people get so seduced into wanting to make money when things are going well, they think they're going to go well forever. When things are going lousy, they think it's going to go lousy forever. And so we make stupid mistakes. That's why most investors over a 10-year period of time, 95% of them lose money. They ride things up and then, they ride back down and they get eaten up alive. So there were a lot of people disturbed that weekend, but the ones that listen, which is the majority of them, made some very smart moves, some of which saved themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars, some millions of dollars, because they were able to know where things were going. And if there's one thing I know in my life, I've spent my whole life doing, it's try to know the road ahead. If you've ever had the humiliating experience of playing a video game against a child, you know it's humiliating because they always win. And they win for one reason, not because they're faster, not because they're stronger, not because they're quicker, because they played this game before. They usually say, come on, try this little game with me. And you're like, no, I don't know how to play. And come on, uncle, come on, auntie, come on, mom or dad. And just point and shoot. And you go boink, boink, and you're dead in 3.2 seconds. And the kid comes in and goes, cha-choom, 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 cha-choom. And about 45 minutes later, you get your second turn. And it's not because they're quicker. It's because they know, because they played this game before, that's where the first bad guy is. That's where the second bad guy is. And so they have the power to anticipate instead of react. Reaction will always cost you. It'll cost you enormous stress. So all I'm sending you out to a message is I'm not saying this is what's so. I'm saying anticipate this possibility of what I'm bringing forth. Let's look at some real quick logic. Go do your own homework and make your own decisions. Whatever you decide, that'll be your decision. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I do want to alert you to a few things, which is why I'm putting out this real quick blog. So without going much depth, I'll tell you that in October and November of 2008, after trillions had melted down in the marketplace, I was invited to go on the Today Show, and they said, would you please pump everybody up? You know, they've lost their life savings. And I said, well, first of all, I don't pump people up. That's not what I do. I believe in intelligence. And telling them it's going to get better suddenly is just not true. And I got 3 minutes. So what I try to do in those 3 minutes is share with people that this is a season change. This is winter, that in winter there are some sunny, beautiful days, but the game has changed. The psychology has changed. The mood has changed. And that your $80 stocks that have gone down to $8, here's the good news. Some of them are going to go to $1. Some are going to go to 95 cents. If you look at the history of what happened in the 30s and what happened in the 70s. And I explained, I work with these financial traders, and I said, that sounds even more depressing, but you're going to see some of those stocks that drop down to 75 cents or $1 jump to $5 like that. Some of them will go back to 10, 12, or 15, and you'll see 1,000%, 2,000% returns on your money if you can not be fearful and if you can get things straight. And I said, I'm not pretending to be the perfect market timer, but I think you can know that there's opportunity here. And I said, you'll see it. And sure enough, I can remember exactly when it happened because I tweeted, and it's one of the few times I probably tweeted 3 or 4 times in my entire history to 1.7 million people. I tweeted on March the 2nd of 2009, look for a bottom. I'm not telling you what to believe, telling you to educate yourself, but right now when it looks like it's the worst it could ever be, everybody I'm working with believes the bottom's coming, and sure enough, 7 days later, it happened. I didn't tweet any other time other than that to give you an idea. I'm not telling you this because I'm so smart. I'm just trying to tell you that the warning is probably worth considering. That's all I'm asking you to do. Protect yourself, or consider protecting yourself out of what I'm sharing with you right now. And so, you know, that gives you a kind of a sense of the track record of what's happened. And just now I've been starting to kind of warn people and say, look, we've seen this huge growth up, and now we have some challenges. So you got to look at what's the long-term trend. You might be able to make some more money for a few more weeks or a few more months, maybe even 6 months or 9 months, but maybe it's time to protect your assets a little bit. And if you think the market is going to reverse, and you're a person that wants to take advantage of that, look at the ways you can make money in any marketplace. So let me just give you real fast, first a quick question, what drives the economy? And then maybe 7 things you should consider that might give you a sense that this economy may be getting a lot worse, which my gut is you probably already believe this, before it gets better, so that you can think about how to take advantage. So what drives the economy? Is it interest rates? Interest rates now are incredibly low. They're about as low as humanly can be gotten. If you look at history, Japan brought interest rates down to virtually 0, and they couldn't stimulate their economy. When the mood changes, the psychological mood, when human beings have a different mindset, they behave radically different. That's my expertise. And what I can tell you is that the economy is driven by one thing, spending. If people spend money, then businesses have customers, they're able to hire other employees, they're able to expand, that produces more jobs. The cycle, as you well know, the more demand, the more the economy rises, and the demand is all based on spending. 70% of spending, 70% of the economy, I should say, is consumer spending. Of that consumer spending, you could predict over the last 25, 35, 40 years, a certain aspect of our economy. And that is this baby boom generation, the largest generation in human history, the largest middle class in human history, was able to spend money at different stages in different ways. When they were all babies, you knew what was going to happen. Diaper sales went absolutely berserk because there were more babies than any other time. When they went to school, there weren't enough teachers. When they got in the marketplace, there was a lot of inflation because young people cost a lot to train and they don't add a lot of value. When they got in that range of 35 to 55, which is when you're the smartest, strongest, you can add the most value, have the most history in a company, productivity in this country exploded. Also, they made the most money, and so they spent that money during that time. There is a natural life cycle, maybe different for you and I, the way in which people spend money. They get married at a certain age on average. You and I might be an exception. They buy their first house at a certain time. So young people might be getting an apartment and cheap furniture, whereas somebody who's in their early 30s might be getting their first home after getting married, whereas somebody on average at 47 or 48 years old gets their largest home or their second home. At the ages between 48 and 50, through the last 50, 75 years of history, people's spending tends to top. For one reason, the kids start to grow up. For another reason, they start thinking, I've got to save money for the future. And it drops off a cliff. The spending really tightens up. Well, the baby boom generation is like this pig going through a snake. Wherever it is, it bulges out. Now that they're no longer babies, and they're no longer in school, they're getting old, then that baby boom generation we all know is going to make healthcare, it already has made it, incredibly expensive, and it's going to get worse. So you can predict certain patterns. The other thing you can predict is even without credit default swaps and all the crazy financial leverage that's gone on, this unbelievable credit, explosion that we had and this bubble that we had, even without that, the baby boom generation, the older ones are turning 65 and the younger ones are 48, 49, and 50. They right now would be starting to become savers anyway as a rule. You and I might be different, but as a generation. When that giant pig stops spending less money, then there's less opportunity for companies to profit. There's less opportunity for jobs. Everything starts to shrink. And the generation that follows it much smaller. But you got to throw on top of that we've just gone through two of the biggest bubbles in history. One of the biggest real estate bubbles and one of the biggest stock market bubbles in history is blowing up right now. So as a result, consumers are fearful. And when that mood changes, their spending changes. When they stop spending, the economy goes into a shrinkage. And that's what we're seeing happen. And the government is trying to spend money and stimulate us to spend money, but it's not working. And so you have to decide if you think that companies can continue to profit by continuing to cut jobs. We have right now a jobless recovery. We have 8.5 million jobs that have been lost. Now, if you make $150,000 a year, you probably don't feel it because there's only 3% unemployment for people who make $150,000 a year, which is why you probably don't hear much from pundits on television getting too upset about the job situation. The average American, it's a little bit more than 9%. For people in that lower 20% of income earners, it's 35% unemployment. Right now, the average, and I'll give you 7 quick reasons why you ought to consider the economy maybe going to get a lot worse in the near future. Not to make you depressed, because my whole view is if you know where things are going, you can anticipate. You can make more money when things are burning down than when they're building up. You can protect your family. You can even profit during this time if you're smart, if you educate yourself. But if you think out of optimism and delusion that everything's going to go well, or if you think that's what I teach, which is never what I've ever taught. I've always taught to be smart, see it as it is, not worse than it is, right? Figure out how you're going to take advantage of whatever season, whatever cards are dealt you. That's my real philosophy. So I'm just trying to alert you to say, here's 7 things to consider. 1, unemployment right now is at record levels. It's pretty horrific. We're talking 35.2 weeks. We're talking the average person today who's unemployed has been unemployed for almost 9 months, 8 months and 3/4 to give you an idea, 8.3. It's insane. It's insane. And there's nothing to look like it's going to turn this around for the economy. So you've got these huge number of people that are not spending money. They're hanging on to their money, what little money they have. And many are in really, really tough financial straits, as you well know. So you're not going to get consumer spending stimulating the economy out of that. Second piece is, where is consumer confidence? Well, according to just a few weeks ago, the University of Michigan's consumer, the sentiment index, they said that they've seen the single largest drop that they've seen. We've dropped to the lowest level of confidence in consumers' minds since October of 2008 when Lehman was coming across. And the only other time it was that low in recent history was right after 9/11. So consumers obviously are starting to feel and anticipate this economy, this spending spree that we've been on, may have stimulated the economy temporarily, but it hasn't solved the problem, and things are going to tighten up, and so consumers are not confident, so they're not going to spend the money. If they don't spend the money, businesses are not going to expand, jobs are not going to expand, the economy is going to shrink. It's pretty scary, but it's true, and you better know what's true. You don't have to like it, but you got to know what's really true. Third, okay, well, how do we know how consumers are going to spend? Well, one way you can look at that is the demand for credit. I know, this is really interesting. The demand for credit is shrinking. In spite of the government stimulating like crazy, in spite of the government doing these bank bailouts, a lot of people are screaming and say banks aren't loaning enough money, but the truth is there just isn't the same level of demand. You're seeing right now that studies that show that in the last year and a year, this last month, year and a year, we've seen a drop that's the single largest drop that we've seen in 60 years in the demand for credit. What's happening is there's only been 2 times in the last 60 years when we as a society have paid back more than we borrowed. We're paying back more than we're borrowing, which is probably a damn good thing. It doesn't stimulate the economy, but we've been on this buying spending binge using credit for so long, creating these giant bubbles in the real estate market, giant bubbles in the stock market, giant bubbles obviously in consumer spending. And people are saying, I got to hang on to my money, I got to be smarter, and I got to pay down my debt. It's painful. It's needed, but it's painful. And it's happening at a level that hasn't happened. In fact, it's only happened twice in 60 years. And the amount that we're paying things down right now versus we're borrowing is 200% more than ever it was before at any time, including the second most intense time this has occurred. So you're seeing the situation.